Soul Grows in Israel, a podcast where we ask the questions about ancient Jewish wisdom, modern life, and everything in between. So let's ask, let's have fun, and let's grow together. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Soul Grows in Israel. And tonight, I am so glad to have Shifra Tauber. If you don't know, she has the Instagram account called Niddah Hug, if you need a hug, but also Niddah. And Shifra basically created this beautiful account based on personal feelings and struggles with Taharat HaMishpacha, and the goal was really to connect more positively to it. It began as a small passion project and became an account that inspires women around the world in observance of this commandment, because as much as it's something we keep in private, truthfully, we're all in this together. Hi, Shifra.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being a guest. I sort of stumbled on your account, and what got me at first was just the beauty of it. Aesthetically, it was so user-friendly, and it gave me a hug. And I think that's the whole point.
There we go.
And I'm just curious, how did this whole thing start?
So I would say going back a good few years. So like you said, Taharat Mishpacha was/is a struggle for me. And I remember I was speaking to a friend and we were discussing, this kind of thing. And she happened to say that in her marriage at that point, the aspect of harchakais didn't yet exist. And I remember thinking, like, wow, like I'm so to speak jealous of her. Like she, obviously it's a choice whether or not to, keep this mitzvah or not. But I remember thinking that she, so to speak, doesn't have to keep this aspect while I do have to keep it. And then she told me that she's like jealous of me that I get to keep it. And I remember thinking, wait, no, like I'm jealous of you. This is not how I thought like it would go. And when she said that, it wasn't, like all of a sudden things changed, but it just made me realize, like, 1 minute, there's something here that I have that I should look for. Like, what is it that I have that she's seeing that I am benefiting from? So I really wanted to connect more positively to it. I also felt like there's this idea that if there's a mitzvah that's challenging for you, that means it's your mitzvah to work on. So I felt like, okay, this is going to be like my mitzvah to work on, to find the joy in. And I really wanted something that I guess connected to me. And I love drawing. And I thought, why don't I put the two of those together? And I spoke to my mashpia, my spiritual mentor, and she said, yeah, go for it. So in my head, it was just, an idea. I wasn't thinking of it the way Niddah Hug is today. It was really just, okay, let's put out there some inspirational, motivational, humorous content and see where it goes. And that's how Niddah Hug started.
So it almost came from one thing that was really hard for you, and then the art thing that came naturally to you, and you were able to merge sort of this like yin and yang and create something meaningful. I wonder if you'd be as effective as a messenger if you found this commandment as an easy thing to do. Do you need the struggle maybe?
So, I think about it, and a lot of times I almost feel like I'm an imposter, that imposter syndrome, when I'm like, Taharat Mishpacha is so hard for me. How do I have this account? And then I'm like, you know what? That's why I have this account. It's because you need to be able to feel. And when it's something that you relate to, you end up being able to make it relatable to others. So I do feel like that is kind of an advantage of, obviously, no one wants to be struggling with it, but the fact that I know that I can feel it, I'm sure that's why other people feel like they can relate to it as well, because it's not someone just being like, oh, it's so beautiful. I don't say that.
Yeah.
It's more like someone being like, it is tough and I'm in it with you and we're all in it together.
I love that. Anyone who feels imposter syndrome, I think, is usually on the right track and is not an imposter at all. If you're that self-aware and humble, you're probably on the right track. And I think everything in my life that I found difficult, whether it's my childhood or things that I do today, those are the points that I connect with people on the deepest levels. And every time I sound like really giddy about something and really excited, and it's easy for me, it's sickening. I see it. No one wants to hear from me. So there is really something to say about that. I find that to be amazing. So tell me a little bit about your background, without prying too much into the personal, Shifra, because I know you're sort of hiding behind this account in a way, but how were you brought up in what kind of sect in Judaism, if you had to put yourself in some sort of box?
So I grew up Chabad, and I do think that definitely influenced the way that Niddah Hug started because in Chabad, Taras Mishpacha is spoken about. And obviously, Taras Mishpacha is a more private mitzvah, but it's not secret. So, for example, one of the Lubavitch Rebbe's 10 mitzvahs, which is his 10 mitzvah campaigns, is Taras Mishpacha. So at a young age, we were singing songs with the words family purity. Obviously, I did not know what it entailed and what it meant, but it was never something that was taboo. It was always something that we were allowed to, speak about. And I have memory. There was a time when I was a teenager, and I remember my mom had a book about, I don't even know what it was called or what exactly it covered, but I remember it had some like laws of the Harchakais in it. And I was very curious, like, okay, what does it entail? So I took the book and I went downstairs, closed the door, and I'm like, reading, and really, that's included? Like, you can't play ping pong together? My mother comes in, like, she opens the door, and I'm like, oh no. Like, she caught me. I remember the first thing that she said, which really, really stuck with me. She said, I'm so happy you're reading that. And I was like, wow. Like, this is not something to be ashamed of. This is something that it's our mitzvah. It's really a mitzvah that was entrusted to women. Like, why can't I be reading about this?
Wow.
Even though like I wasn't anywhere near getting married at that point, it was something that my mother knew I would be keeping. I feel like just that idea that it was something that we were brought up with, that there was no shame around. There was that open, I would say, ability for having these conversations, and that really affected how I approached this. That like Taras Mishpacha is not taboo. It's something that can and should be spoken about, and why not put it out there in this way?
I love that. I think Chabad is quite special because it's being so observant of every detail and every law, and also being so open-minded. And I think most people have a really hard time with that. They're either like, forget this, or, sort of tunnel vision. So maybe that makes sense how you're on this almost the shlichut, you feel like a messenger of sorts. That really resonates with me. I don't know how that shame came to be. It's so strange to me because when I see or learn anything about this topic, people are speaking openly with people like Rabbi Akiva and in the Mishnah, and it's so open and easily discussed. When do you think this happened, that women felt ashamed or were shamed for discussing? It doesn't have to be sexuality, but even Niddah, anything that's private doesn't mean it's to be ashamed of.
So I don't know exactly at what point there was that switch, but I do feel that when something is private, a lot of times people end up going to the extreme to keep it private. But in this mitzvah, it's not that the privacy means that we're, supposed to be ashamed of it. It's the privacy is that it's so special that we're keeping it just between us and our spouse. It's not something we don't need to, post on Instagram, going to mikvah. We shouldn't.
Guys, don't do that. Yeah.
But at the same time, if someone is like struggling with it, or someone wants to gain inspiration, there's nothing wrong with speaking about it. There's nothing wrong with looking for that inspiration. And I feel that sometimes we end up being like, oh, we're not allowed to talk about this. Why are we not allowed to? There's no not allowed to. Of course, it's a mitzvah. And I also think like you want, your kids or the people even around you to know that you keep this mitzvah. And obviously not in a way that you're flaunting it. It's not, the same as saying like, I keep Shabbos.
Yeah.
But it's something that if this is something that's God-given, that means that there is no shame around it. There's nothing that needs to be hidden.
Love that. I remember being so embarrassed coming home like on a Friday night, and if my hair was kind of dripping from the mikvah, I'd be like mortified until you sort of grow into it. And I didn't have anyone like you. In fact, my college class teacher, God bless her, like some of the things were kind of absurd that I learned, and then I had to sort of relearn it later on in life, and that whole idea. I think shame is such a hard place to be when it comes to serving God. It's like you
Yes.
said, it's such a contradiction. I wonder if girls today or the younger women today who are 19 do you find them to be a bit more open-minded?
I do
Right.
think that there has been a shift
Hmm.
that a lot of topics that used to be more, shoved under the rug are now being spoken about. And I do think obviously there's a way to speak about things, but I think that when we approach these topics with the like dignity and the like sensitivity that they deserve, then there's no reason why we can't speak about them. And even to singles, there are sometimes when someone follows Niddah Hug. So I usually almost always will send out a welcome message. So if someone starts following, they get like a message, hey there,
That's so
follow.
special. That's such a nice touch,
Of
really.
course. Um, and there's sometimes that the person will respond, oh, I'm single. And I'll tell them, like, honestly, I think it's amazing that you're here because you're already cultivating this positive connection to this mitzvah.
Do you ever hear feedback of people discussing, with you what they find the most difficult?
So I would say every person has their own struggles. I think for the most part, there's certain things that groups of people will be like, oh, I struggle with that. I struggle with that. I remember someone said, can you tell me all the struggles that there could be with Harrison Mishpacha so I can know which category I fit into? And I said, no. Like, if you're not struggling, you don't need to be struggling.
Yeah.
But let's say I'll give an example for myself. Like for me, the no touching, like the harchakas aspect is very difficult for me because physical touch is my love language. So when
Mine too. That makes me so happy because no, people always tell me how that's for men and women do acts of service.
oh,
No, no, no. Okay. Thanks for validating me. You can continue.
of course. So for me, when there's not physical touch, then it feels like, woman, if you're trying to stay away from me, like, are you mad at me? But like, he's like, my husband's not mad at me. It's just that we're keeping a mitzvah. So I would say that's, a struggle that, comes up. But I do feel like across the board, everyone has their personal wins and challenges within this mitzvah.
Yeah. I've noticed also some cultural differences. Like when people go to the mikveh in the States, they have a bit more of an invasive experience with the balaniyot, the women who do check them. Where I live in Israel, everyone's kind of hands off, no one's checking your nails, you go do what you do. And people who have moved have to express that to me. Like that was sort of a relief, or, so that's one thing that I think a lot of girls should be warned. Like there's a woman there, but you don't have to let her or allow anything that you don't feel comfortable with. You have a voice. If you feel like you want to get into that mikveh and they say no, because you say, my rabbi said, that's fine, and speak up. And I think that goes along with the shame. You don't have a voice when you're already embarrassed from the outset. So I can see how difficulties would shape and vary depending on where you live, first of all. So that was interesting to me. Another thing I always think about is I read Shir HaShirim, right? The Megillah from Shlomo HaMelech. And it's kind of explicit, and I know it's symbolic, and I know it means so many other things, and there's so much beauty there. And I know according to Jewish law, you build a mikveh before you build a yeshiva or a hospital or whatever. It's such an integral part that I find that whether you think what you're doing is serious or not, it is kind of vital. It really, really is, not just to me, but anyone who's following you. I just want to give you that's not a question. That's just
Yeah.
a pat on your back. Do you give people advice in terms of feeling more empowered as they go to the mikveh or as they do embark on this mitzvah?
So I would say my goal isn't really so much like to give advice, more as to be like a little like voice of encouragement and just telling them you got this and you could do it. And it's basically the posts that I try to put out are the posts that I want to hear. And I remember there was one time that there was a post, I think it literally just said, you got this. And someone replied privately, you really like, you don't know how much I had to hear that today. And I was like, wow, like to me, it's simple. And yes, it's true. I need to hear that also sometimes. But to her, like, that's what she needed. And it's not advice. I'm not telling her what to do.
Mm.
I'm more just telling her, like, you already have it in you.
It's in the brevity of it. I heard someone once say, it was a musical producer, and he told his artists, he said, never make music that your audience will love. Just create music that you're going to love. And it sounds kind of right. And it kind of sounds like that's what you're doing. Like, what would I want to hear if I was in it? And as much as we're saying, let's be open and let's build a community, like, I don't know how open I've been with my friends about this kind of stuff. So I do think it's a very personal thing. If someone's alone with their Instagram, I could see how they can sort of let loose and feel good when they're reading your messages. Um, Was Instagram something that you always wanted? Like, were you in touch with it? Was social media a comfortable platform for you?
So I actually hate social media. It like just drains everything. Like I tell myself, okay, I'm only going on Niddah Hug, like just to post.
It is draining. It really,
Um,
really is.
but I felt that Instagram was where I guess I could post in the format that I wanted it to be. So if you look at the page, so there's inspirational, like I said, inspirational, humorous, and motivational posts. They're divided by rows. When I post 3 times a week, the first post will be inspirational, the second post will be humorous, and the third motivational. So they kind of like are divided. Like, so if someone wants, just a little bit of inspiration, they know which row to look on.
The grid is set up. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it did evolve to be more than that. There's now like a WhatsApp community and people could, benefit that way. So obviously that doesn't have that same like grid feel. I do love using Instagram, I guess what I would say in the right way. I feel like this is how it should be used to empower others and not to drain people. And I think like I can use it for a good purpose and the right purpose, then I'm happy to be on Instagram.
It's amazing. And I know that when we wanted to schedule this Zoom, you mentioned putting babies to sleep. Does this in any way impair you or take time away from your kids, or are you able to balance? I know how tempting it is to sort of go overboard on a specific project.
So I will say that I'm the type of person that like if I'm going to put my mind to something, like it needs to happen, like very, very disciplined. And like that being said, it was also so different of a challenge for me to be like, I'm going to be posting like 3 times a week consistently. And when I recently had my baby, thank God, I said, I'm going to be taking maternity leave and I don't know exactly how long. So I post to stories like old posts, but I didn't yet get back into like posting new content. And that's just because I know that, there's priorities in life and, maybe people haven't seen the old posts and they're worth putting out there again. So I do feel that in life, you got to do what is right for you, and projects are great, but you can't let it overtake you in a way that you don't have time for yourself or for your family. So I try to draw like the posts and come up with content pretty much once it's nighttime. My usual time for that is Matzah Shabbos. When Shabbos ends really late, that could be really challenging because I don't love staying up super late. And then sometimes that carries on to during the week, but it's something that I really also like care about. Like I would say like after my family, like Niddah Hug is really a priority for me. And I feel like it's that way because I know that it's not something that only benefits others, but like if I could, say it in a little bit of a selfish way, it really benefits me too. And what changed most for me, I would say, is really like that mind shift, but it's something that I realized that I needed. I needed that mindset of, being able to see this mitzvah in that light, and being, I guess, forced, so to speak, to put out content really makes me think that way. So I would say that's why it became a priority, because it's something that I realized is just so important and valuable to myself, as well as I'm sure so many others.
Yeah. And not only that, but whatever you've been saying, whoever's listening, you can substitute Niddah Hug for whatever passion project you're doing and realize there's always going to be a hierarchy of priorities. And husband, children, in my humble opinion, that should always be number one. And the number two could be so close, but just not there. And the idea that you took this healthy maternity leave, you know what? I found you from those stories. So I didn't see your old posts, right? And the idea is there's like trying, and then there's this sort of surrendering after you finish trying. And I think that's a real shlichut, when it's not hurting anyone and you're not taking love away from anybody. And I think a lot of women struggle with that balance. I think you got to figure it out. So that's pretty cool. Tell me about some negative experiences, if any, you've had in this process.
So honestly, I would say the feedback has been incredible. Like, I don't think that there's been, any like negativity towards Niddah Hug. People really like resonate with it. And I think that's something that I honestly didn't know what to expect. Like, are people going to like it, not like it? Obviously, everyone has a choice to follow. No one needs to follow if it doesn't, suit their needs or what they're looking for. But yeah, thank God it's been overwhelmingly positive. I guess there was one time, I'm not sure how it happened, but actually twice.
That's
Someone
you.
took someone took we have merch. So someone took the picture that we have of these I titled stickers, which is, kind of supposed to look like I voted, and
That's
they
very cute.
posted
Red, white, and
just
blue. Just if you're not if you're just watching and not listening, and it says I Tauber, which means I sort of immersed myself in the mikveh water. Okay, continue.
yeah. So there was twice. One was on social media, and another time was on Twitter. That like people alerted me, like people are posting like a picture of your sticker and just letting you know. And I remember like, okay, where do you go first? The comments. And just that feeling of like, some people saying things like, who would ever create something like that? And I'm like, me.
Hello.
But that gave me a feeling like, okay, I guess not everyone appreciates it with like, which, like I said, like not everyone needs to appreciate it.
Mhm.
But it made me feel that, you keep doing what your like focus is. Like for these people, maybe they don't feel like it's a struggle or they don't see it in the same way that I do. And just because they think of it one way doesn't mean that I need to think of it in that way. And like I said, the response has been so overwhelmingly positive that like focusing on any negative would be like
Mhm.
focusing on the black dot in a white page. Like
Um,
there's no point, you know,
I don't mean to even.
what you're doing.
The only reason I'm bringing well, first you have one more story for us. I didn't forget, but also one more negative. And I'm not trying to focus on the negative. I think my point is almost to everyone who's out there doing something meaningful, you're going to get pushback, and that shouldn't stop you. You can listen to the criticism and see if there's a point there, but usually there isn't, and just keep on going, you know? Okay, what else?
Yeah, I mean, I think those people that were, making those comments, number one, I don't even think they were women. And this page,
Uh,
pretty much for women. So I don't think that like I have to be worried. Like the people that are following are the ones that want to benefit and do benefit. And yeah, like I said, like keep doing what you're doing, you know?
yeah. Tell me about this book. It is so beautiful and illustrated. And how did you come about writing a book? And I just found it on Amazon. There you go. It is so pretty. And maybe I'm kind of visual, but I like when you're learning something and it doesn't feel like this heavy burden that you should do. Instead, it's something that you want to do. And when something is aesthetically pleasing or light or quirky or fun, it's the way learning should be, I think, especially in this feminine sphere. So tell me a little bit about the process.
So, like I said, when Niddah Hug started, my goal was really to connect positively to it on a personal level. And I just felt like, okay, let me put it on Instagram because that's a way of reaching a lot of people. And if it could help others, which I know I'm like, I couldn't be the only one struggling,
Right.
So I said, let me just put it out there. And then, so this is a book of the first year of posts. And we said, like, you know what, maybe let's put it out there in a format that people could actually hold. And that's what we did. And I feel that it's honestly, it's a labor of love when you finally get to hold a book that you've worked so hard on in your hands. What I love about it, I would say, is it's kind of, in line with how the account is as well. But one of the first pages says like open when you need a bit of, and then it shows the page numbers for inspiration, humor, and motivation. So whatever you feel that you need a bit of, if it's the inspiration, so you open up to that part of the book. If it's the humor, you open up to that part of the book. And if it's motivation, then you got that too. And I do feel like it's kind of like a hug in your hands. I mean, with all the merch as well, but it's the kind of thing that, there's nothing bad in it. If someone wants to keep it on their night table instead of on their bookshelf, that's cool. But it's something that, like, why not? Why not have a book that makes this mitzvah feel good and that makes this mitzvah feel like you're in it with so many others and it's relatable and it's not something to be ashamed of. And it's just, yeah, like I said, like that hug.
Then like the hug, labor of love. I think that's wonderful. Do you have people who come back to you and say, you've changed my whole world, or I saw your account and now I have chizuk and I feel like I can do this?
Yes. And I remember thinking like one of the first times that someone said, like, you helped me keep this mitzvah. And I remember thinking like me drawing on my couch like, I think you're talking about someone else. But no, she was saying that this is something that really inspires her. And she isn't the only one that said that. And I always think as well, like, there's so many people that probably didn't message, but probably feel that way.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that in an egotistical way, trying to
Um,
make myself feel good, but more in a way of like, a lot of times I see other people's accounts and I don't necessarily comment, but I think to myself, wow, that's amazing. Yay. And like trying to benefit from that. It's helping others in such a personal and powerful way. So it was really like cool for me to see that something that is so, I would say, personal is able to affect so many people so deeply. And when people like take the time to message that, it just shows me that you really just don't know the difference that you can have in someone's life. And it's crazy. It's
wow.
amazing and powerful, but like, wow, like you really, really don't know.
Isn't it humbling in this way? Because here you are putting yourself out there and you have no idea if it's going to resonate. And when it does, to me, it's almost like a tiny heavenly tap on the shoulder, like, you're doing well, just carry on. And that's the feedback. How does your husband find what you're doing?
So I've definitely asked him a few times, like, you're sure you're cool with this? And he always said yes. And I think that number one, Tars Mishpacha, as much as we feel maybe the load of it like goes on us as women, like your spouse is in it with you.
Yeah.
And it's something that he's always, made sure that I know that it's not just me keeping this by myself, that he's always in it with me. And whether it's, the emotional validation, whether it's calling a rub or whatever it is, like we're in it together. It's not something that is just on me. And with the account specifically, I would say, yeah, I think he just feels that it's something that if we can help other people, then let's do it.
Oh my gosh, I love that you're on the same page because really, once you guys are a team, I think it takes so much of the struggle out of it.
Yeah.
Were you always artistic? Because it's really nice, the stuff you're doing.
You. So I always loved to draw. It's not like I ever took like an official course or anything like that. I would say pretty much, self-taught. But yeah, it's always something like I loved doing and being creative and all that.
Yeah, I think that, if there's no small journey, and anyone who's doing something that they love, I think that there's a reason that they're doing it. And luckily it aligns with something so divine and holy and important for Jewish women everywhere. Another thing I like to tell people is how much the Torah wants couples to be together intimately at the right time, how it's never preventing it. And very often, if you'll ask a question of a Rav, he will look for loopholes or look for ways to make it okay. Do you ever have this crossover where people are asking you for the letter of the law or halacha, even though I know this is not your brand?
So I'll always tell them, like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form a halachic authority. And like, I'm not a call teacher, Um, and like, I want to just stay in my lane. So my lane being that I'm here to encourage, to validate, but never to, you know, offer any advice or any halachic kind of like that. And I think there's definitely resources out there if women want to get that kind of info, even in a discreet kind of way, hiding behind the screen. But that's not for me.
Yeah. Um, I wonder if you would change anything, like if you have a daughter, would you change any sort of way? And when it comes to this topic, I mean, from how maybe you were brought up, no shame on your childhood or your parents or anything, but almost the culture, would you educate them in a different way or would you really keep it the same?
So I do think, like my parents definitely gave me that ability to be able, like I said, to speak about this openly. And I do think that's something that I would want in my own home as well. And maybe even more so, I would say that my kids definitely know what Niddah Hug is, and no shame over there. Like my son has asked me, like, "Are you drawing for Niddah Hug?" And like he knows, and he's a boy, but I do think that why not? Why can't our children know about this mitzvah? It's a beautiful thing for them to have that connection to already now in the positive way, even when they're young, and they can grow up knowing that we're allowed to speak about it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that my children feel that it is something that is an open like topic of conversation. Obviously, like I said, there's the privacy of this mitzvah, and we're not, you know, throwing out all the aspects that are supposed to be kept like private. Like I said, we're not just announcing mikvah night and stuff like that, but like speaking about a mitzvah, there's never something wrong with that.
What advice would you give someone who's listening right now who does feel disempowered or just like, this is not for me? You know, is there anything you could tell them? I know you don't like giving advice, but in your special positive style, what might you say to someone listening?
So really, I would say my main message is you got this. And the reason I know I can tell you that is because Taras Mishpacha is one of the three mitzvahs that Hashem specifically gave to us as women. And I feel like obviously Hashem gave us like all the mitzvahs as Jews, but this is a mitzvah that God literally gave to you. And if he gave you something, then he also gave you the ability to keep it.
Yeah.
So really, like it's in your power. And like as much as there's the struggle, that means that you're doing something right. That means you're working towards something, and really, really like just focus on the fact that it's allowed to be hard and that you can do it. You got this.
Do you think that it helps marriages ultimately? And I know that's not the main reason a lot of times we do things and we don't know why we have that mitzvah. And there's the humility of saying, I'm bowing my head and I'm going forward. But in my life, I think that it's almost like the secret potion to keep a marriage, at least its vitality or excitement. And I'm curious if you would agree with me.
So obviously, Taras Mishpacha is a chayk. That means it's a mitzvah that we don't know the reason to, like you said. And at the same time, I do think that Hashem gives us these little like glimpses of how it could help us, just so that, you know, we get that feel good kind of feeling. But I definitely do think that, you know, one of the reasons that we could feel good about it, like I said, these little glimpses that Hashem like gives us, is that we see how it keeps that like spark in our marriage, that we want to reconnect, that we want that connection to stay. And I think it's in the 5 Love Languages book that it says like the average span of the excitement in a marriage, how long that lasts. And I think it's 2 and a bit years. And that's crazy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but but the point is that that's not a long time.
No.
And I think that with this mitzvah, we're able to kind of rekindle and like reignite that spark. And I think that's something that's so powerful. And again, that's not why God gave us this mitzvah. We don't know the reason, but I think it's something that if that helps someone, then yeah, focus on that. Focus on that. This is something that keeps your marriage alive, and not just alive, but thriving.
Yes. And I also think there's this ownership of the body in a way. Like now I'm not allowed to be with anyone. And it's sort of, you know, it creates a separation that's not about you or your husband. It's this higher sort of purpose. And then you have time to bathe, and then you can go get a manicure after, or whatever it is. It's almost like, I'm not going to say royal, but there is something to that of being above just the body, even though this is about the body. I think that's wonderful.
I'd say also it's that idea that your husband values you not just for your body, for you, for your emotional like self. And I think that's something that a lot of times, if there's just only physical, that we could kind of overlook, because the physical is so powerful, it ends up having that ability to like overtake, you know, the other aspects of a relationship, which is emotional intimacy and all that. And I think by letting us know that this like emotional self that we are is also so valued and important, is something that, as much as we might really want the physical, is something that's so important to, you know that like that exists, that it's important as well.
I love it. I've heard that even the word tzniut, which means modesty, it really just means your inner world, more if you want to be literal. And it kind of sounds like the same thing. These women are so whatever, enticing or beautiful, or wow, we're so much more than that, you know, and we're not going to blind everybody with just the outside. We're going to sort of demand for ourselves to go inside and for the people we love to come inside too. I think that's amazing. So I have just one rapid fire question I ask all my guests, whether they're religious or not, so I'm going to throw it out there. And I'm just curious what your answer is going to be, because you are coming from the Chabad world. But okay, we all talk about redemption, and to me, this is a really good segue because what you're doing, in my humble, tiny little opinion, is being a messenger to bring women closer to something so important for the whole family, not just for her, which to me is a sort of redemption. And I wonder what you imagine if you could paint a picture in your artistic way of what a world that maybe it reached enlightenment or utopia or geula or whatever word you want to put it in. How would you describe it?
Are we connecting this with Tars Mishpacha or is this separate?
I connected it with Taras Mishpach, but no, it's totally separate. Like you can go macro and zoom out a little bit.
So I would say, I guess the way I envision, a world when Mashiach is already here and, we have the Beis HaMikdash back, is really a world that we feel whole and complete and, no more pain, no more suffering. One where we look back on Galus and realize how much opportunities we had to connect with God. And even though there were challenges there, and this is, I guess, connecting to Niddah Hug, that they were not just challenges, they were opportunities for growth. And God was giving us this crazy, huge, ability to connect with him and to make the world a better place and to bring us to that point where, we get to bask in God's light and all of his glory. And although we're, not yet there, I do feel that, I guess, especially as a Chabad woman, that, they say it's like it's in the woman's merit. And I feel like by keeping this mitzvah, God willing, every single one of us will and should merit the complete redemption.
Amen. Well, on that note, Shifra, thank you so much for coming on here and giving us your time and giving this really beautiful niche work that you're doing for the world out there. It doesn't exist, and you filled that place, and you're making us feel really, really good. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye, guys.